Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Today, I will be representing a topic on functions and relations in mathematics. Before we start, you often see functions and relations in mathematics, especially when dealing with sets, order pairs, and graphs. However, sometimes it can be confusing to differentiate between a relation and a function because they are closely connected. So, in this presentation, I will explain what a relation is, what a function is, the differences between them, and also how we can identify a function using the vertical line test. So, let's begin with the basic of concept of a relation. First, what is a relation? A relation is basically a set of order pairs that connects elements from one set to another set. To understand this better, let's look at the example shown on the slide. We have set A, which contains numbers 1 and 2, and set B, which contains numbers 3 and 4. The relation is represented by the order pairs 1 3, 2 4, and also 2 3. In an order pair, the first value represents the input, while the second value represents the output. So, for example, the order pair 1 3 means that input 1 is related to output 3. Now, the important thing to notice is input number 2. Input 2 is connected to output 4, but at the same time, it is also connected to output 3. As we can see from the diagram, one input can be connected to more than one output. This is allowed in a relation. So, a relation can have many-to-many connections between inputs and outputs. Now that we understand relation, let's move on to functions. So, what is a function? A function is actually a special type of relation. However, unlike a general relation, a function follows one very important rule, which is each input must have exactly one output. This means that one input can produce two or more different outputs. Let's look at the example on the slide. We have the function f of x equals x plus 1. The domain contains 1, 2, and 3. If we substitute 1 into the function, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So, input 1 gives output 2. Next, 2 plus 1 equals 3. Therefore, input 2 gives output 3. And finally, 3 plus 1 equals 4. So, input 3 gives output 4. As we can see, every input produces only one output. This is what makes it a function. So, the easiest rule to remember is one input, one output. If one input gives two different outputs, then the relation is not a function. So, now let's compare relations and functions directly. On this slide, we can clearly see the difference between a relation and a function. First, for a relation, one input can be connected to multiple outputs. For example, in the relation shown here, input 1 is connected to output 3 and also output 4. This is acceptable because a relation does not require every input to have only one output. On the other hand, a function is more specific. A function allows exactly one output for each input. For example, using f of x equals x plus 1, input 1 gives 2, input 2 gives 3, and input 3 gives 4. Every input has only one result. However, there is one important point that we should remember. Every function is a relation, but not every relation is a function. This is because a function follows the basic idea of a relation, but it also has an additional rule, which is exactly one output for each input. So, if we want to determine whether a relation is a function, we can ask one simple question. Does any input have more than one output? If the answer is yes, then it is only a relation and not a function. But if the answer is no, then it can be considered a function. Besides using order pairs, we can also identify functions by looking at graphs. When a relation is represented using a graph, we can use a method called the vertical line test. The vertical line test is a simple graphical method used to determine whether a graph represents a function or not. The idea is very simple. Imagine drawing a vertical line anywhere across the graph. If the vertical line touches or crosses the graph at only one point for every x value, then the graph represents a function. For example, a graph such as y equals x squared is a function because a vertical line will only cross the graph once at each x value. However, if the vertical line crosses the graph at more than one point, then the graph is not a function. A circle is a good example. If we draw a vertical line through the middle of a circle, the line will cross the circle at two different points. This means that one x value has two different y values. Remember our function rule? One input must have exactly one output because the circle gives two outputs for one input. It fails the vertical line test and is not a function. So, the vertical line test gives us a quick and visual way to distinguish functions from other relations. So, to summarize today's presentation, there are three main points that we should remember. First, a relation connects elements from one set to another using order pairs. A relation can allow one input to be connected to multiple outputs. Second, a function is a special type of a relation where each input has exactly one output. The easiest way to remember this is the rule: one input, one output. Finally, when we are given a graph, we can use the vertical line test. If a vertical line crosses the graph more than once, the graph is not a function. These basic concepts are important because functions and relations are foundations for other mathematical topics, especially calculus and more advanced mathematics. So, understanding the difference between relations and functions will help us understand more complex mathematical concepts in the future. That is all from me about functions and relations in mathematics. I hope this presentation has helped you understand the basic concept and the difference between a relation and a function. Thank you for watching my presentation. Bye bye.